Well, good morning. Welcome again to the class and honestly considering the issues. I thought before we start I'd share a revelation I had this week, and it will revolutionize parenting. Parents, you made a mistake. Buying all those toys. You don't need toys. All you need, yes, my grandson has taken possession of the box my chimney vent came in. He calls it box. It has a name. And the funny part, last night my daughter comes to me kind of forlorn. He won't let me in the box. He says, too big, stay out. I says, yeah. So I'm going to be coming out with a whole line of boxes. But seriously, we've been covering social issues in this series that have a serious note to them for sure. However, I made a note that much like the early church, we're not afraid, we're not going to back away from controversial part. Although I'm going to reiterate, it is not my intent to offend, to be disdaining, like condemning, judgmental, like that's not my intent. The intent is to rationally approach these issues. And I believe that is the litmus test to getting through all the tremendous data and the range of emotion concerning these issues is to look for rationality. And I have said before, and I'll say again, right now, you're sitting there consciously or unconsciously processing what I say to see if it's rational. You really are. However, when we do that, we have to remember that there's a criteria that has to be used in evaluating issues, considering issues. There has to be a top priority and hierarchy of criteria to examine things, and that part of the problem with our culture right now is that everybody wants their criteria to be the top criteria. There is, my other daughter put it well, that there is no unifying cohesion in our culture now. It seems to be splintering, and part of it is these issues. So last week we discussed whether you are a church person or a non-church person, whether you should be involved in the environmental issue, and then the other one was in the politics issue. Should someone take a position on whether, as a society and a government, because government is involved with a society, be protecting the environment? That was the first one we talked about, and I more or less said that the top criteria is that question. Should we protect the environment? And if so, to what degree? And I gave the range of, at all costs, literally humans are the enemy of the environment, need to be removed, to the other extreme is we don't need to do anything at all about the environment and just use it for what we want. And I thought that the most rational position was to view humanity as stewards of the environment. Stewards meaning we manage the environment because we've been entrusted with the environment. And whether you're a churched or non-churched, we went into this, there is the idea that for whatever ethical reasons, mankind has been giving the stewardship of the environment. And then that goes to what degree? To me, because stewardship comes with authority. Stewardship means you are not the enemy of the thing you're managing, but you should manage it responsibly, effectively. I think I gave the example of if you had a brand new Ford Mustang and you lent it to me, I would have an ethical responsibility not to squeal the tires, blow the engine, and run it into a guardrail. you would expect me to bring it back, at least in the shape it comes, maybe even better. If I had it for a couple weeks, you expect it to come back nice and washed, my McDonald's cup's not all over your back seat. And then we discussed how, regardless if you're churched or non-churched, whether we should be involved in politics. And I made the point that in a participatory government, we need to be participating. And that, yes, we do feel that, my voice, my vote doesn't mean anything. It's worthless. But in actuality, that's robbing the governmental system of your resource, of your input. And then we had a talk about who may participate in a participatory government, in the sense that to tell a churched person that they can participate in politics as a person, but you can't bring in your religious views, is not rational. It doesn't wash. Because in essence, while yes, I do believe that the church as a formal organization should not be the government. I don't believe America should be formally Christian in that sense. However, because I put the role of government is different from the church. The church role is to point the finger in the leaders and say, this is wrong. Like Nathan did King David, this is wrong. You are not doing what's right. We call you on the carpet. Okay? But the way that's done is through the individual church person expressing their views, participating in the system. To say that you, church person, may not use your churchiness in the public square is in effect saying you can't bring your morality into the public, but I can. Let me explain. Somebody's morality is being used in government. Even in the illusion of a purely secular government, which is an illusion, there's still somebody's morality being expressed. Even, I gave you an example, a seatbelt law is a moral law. It is saying seatbelts are a good thing for society, for the person, and you will do it. Not, hey, we recommend this. No, you will do this. That's what our government is saying. Our society is saying, you will do it. It's a moral stand. So my point was, somebody's morality is going to be used. So why is it okay to say to the church person, yours can't be used, but mine can be? That would be in effect. So in a really good book about legislating morality, and I realize that title may bring up emotions of animosity, you're trying to ram religion down my throat. No. This book contends there is a difference between an official religious denominational legislating and a morality. It's by Geisler and Torek, Legislating Morality. Excellent book. Very excellent book. So, that's what we did. And now we're moving on today to human sexuality. Did he just say that in the church? Yes. Chip Ingram, who I've been loosely using as a template, Cultural Shock by Chip Ingram, makes the claim, quote, never in the history of the world has a culture and its values concerning sexuality shifted as fast or as drastically as they have in America in the last 50 years, end quote. Now, I have not researched this for myself, I'm sorry, but he provides a chart several things he puts as support of this statement. One of them is a chart that shows in 1950, 5% of teenage girls and 10% of teenage boys were sexually active in high school. And then the chart shows how in 2000, it's 70% of teenage girls and 80% of teenage boys sexually active. He also cites, in support of this drastic change in sexuality, he cites a 1969 shift from the legal protections for marriage to the no-fault divorce operations today, and he claims the consumption of pornography being skyrocketing, and that America is the major consumer of that. I have not researched this, but these are the things that he offers in support of his statement that the values concerning sexuality has drastically changed. So, I don't think it's unreasonable to say, regardless where you are on a position of sexual promiscuity, to say that it has dramatically changed over the last 50. I don't think that's an unfair statement. So how did this happen? Leaving the question of should it happen to later, but how has this happened? Ingram lists 3 factors that he characterizes as the perfect storm of consequences for this dramatic shift in sexuality. 1, the shift from absolute, objective truth to relativism. Number 2, the search for freedom in the 60s and 70s. And at first I'm like, what's wrong with that? It depends how you define freedom. Number 3, here's one of the things that might get me in trouble. The bad teaching or even the lack of teaching in the church about sexuality. How often do we hear a sermon or a Sunday school lesson in our churches on sexuality? I think very few. Maybe sometimes for good reason. You don't want the pastor teaching children's church to go down there and give it in-depth. Yes, I understand that. But on the other end, adults, and I'm not just saying married, but also singles coming up. How often do we teach on this? Ingram cites Martin Luther, the great reformer, as that he saw married sex as only for procreation, not intimacy, not, am I allowed to say, fun in marriage? Nope, it's only for procreation. The church is actually for fun in marriage? What? Yeah, that's a crazy concept, right? I mean, I would say, fellas, when was the last time you made your wife laugh? I think that's a very important thing. I think that gets us out of trouble, guys. You know, distract them with laughter, you know. Notice how big he talks when his wife's not here. Yes, Ingram. Yeah. Ingram describes the church as laboring under Victorian, snobbish, sexist, dirty, and bad approach to sexuality. I mean, you just don't talk about sex. That's one guy I remember saying, that's funny, in the church you hear almost nothing about human sexuality. You go outside the church and you hear it all over the place. That, he said, was supposed to be the other way around. Ingram says that this approach, this Victorian snobbish approach, has created an air of ignorance and distortion. Here's the important point: setting up future generations to be unprepared for the devastating wave of sexual license. If we keep our mouths shut and don't teach the proper way to view human sexuality, somebody is going to teach them. Like I said, somebody's morality is used, somebody is going to teach them. I understand, as a parent, there is this, When do I say stuff? And then from the kid's standpoint, oh no, Dad, you are not having this conversation with me. Oh no. I remember I had daughters. So, back when I had all the answers, I said to my wife, you need to have this discussion with them. They're like 9 and 10. You need to have this discussion. And then somehow, a week later, in the car driving with my daughters, I found myself in the middle of that conversation. I don't know how that happened. Neither they or myself was happy, but there it was. So I just want to say yes. Hollywood and Fifth Avenue perpetuate this mindset, of sex sells. But Ingram accuses the church of being spiritually impotent in this area. Ooh. So Chip Ingram lists a cost of this sexual revolution, going back now to how human sexuality has changed dramatically in our culture. This sexual revolution, he lists the cost in the fact of over 1 million people divorcing each year, leaving 1 million kids without a stable home. He also lists billions of dollars spent on support for unwed mothers, not to mention spent for those with STDs. Now, important, I'm not standing up here suddenly, looking down, oh, these people in this situation, how bad they are, bad. No, I'm not saying that. The church should have compassion. But let's have a point here. There is a difference between having compassion for people in this situation and helping them versus endorsing that. There is a difference. Our culture has now said, unless you endorse what I believe, you hate us. There's no distinction there between I respect you, but I disagree with you, to, you have to clap for me. So this brings up what I think is another cost. And while it's not impactful as hurt children would be, I think it goes to our examination of rationality concerning human sexuality. Think of this. If you paid $100,000, I wouldn't, but say you paid $100,000 for the top of the line SUV. Do you remember when those military, what were those things called? Hummers. People were buying Hummers. All I thought was, what do they get, like 2 miles per gallon? But imagine you paid for that top of the line. And then, however, you drove it like a hybrid. And you, in fact, looked for every smooth road to drive it on. Was that a good use of something that was designed to be ridden off-road? I would say no. So let's apply that to human sexuality. What? How's he going to do that? I don't know. It seemed like a good idea when I was writing this. So let me see if I can pull this off. Let's assume that when we look at DNA, RNA, and especially all these intricate, microscopic little machines, biological machines in your cell, running back and forth, doing jobs, figuring out what parts of the cell to scrap and use for other things and what parts to repair. When you look at all that intricacy biologically, can you not conclude that we were designed for that? That there was a purposeful design involved in that process? In philosophy, we call this specified complexity. Complexity with a purpose. That's what that means. So the natural question to follow that conclusion is, what were we designed for? That would be a natural. And then a sub-question, a part of that question becomes whether we were designed to just be a biological machine, just to function, just to operate. I mean, that's all we were designed. Turn the switch. We do our little biological marching. Or B, we were designed for a higher purpose, a more meaningful purpose? Which one of those two is it? Now I think you could figure out that I hold the position that we were designed for a higher purpose, that even looking at what we are biologically, we see purposefulness, intelligence, and that has an end goal in mind other than just to live and breathe. But let's take the live and breathe for a moment. Just take it, because we want to examine both sides of issues. Now, when my alarm goes off, that means I have to reset my camera. So don't think that I was being tardy and not turning my phone off. But let's say the purpose behind, let's take this other view. Let's say the purpose behind human being was just to biologically operate. Click, the switch goes on, like my coffee maker. Coffee maker, well, that has a purpose. Okay, that's not a good example. I'm trying to think of something that just you turn on the switch and it just operates just to operate and it has no purpose. Do you see how hard that is? That's hard to do, right? Somewhere in here I wrote down, I was in Boston years ago, and they had this huge contraption with the levers and the little chutes and the spinnies, and the metal ball would go down through all that. You ever seen those things? I mean, it was big and it was intricate. Even that had a purpose, to entertain. It wasn't just there. But let's say that's all we are. We are just designed to just function. It's just about functionality. That would make sex just functional. It's just a part of operating. Okay, so we would have sex almost entirely to produce more biological machines. Any extracurricular sex, I didn't know how else to say it, would be a byproduct of this process used to facilitate to get a woman pregnant. It's just physical. And you old people, you're saying, that was Olivia Newton-John. Yes, that was Olivia Newton-John. I won't tell you that I have that album in my basement somewhere. But anyways, it's just physical. Pleasure is just a trick to get someone pregnant. It's just a trick. Okay, so sex in a purely biological functioning person is just about having children. I mean, think about it. But let's take the other approach, the one I like, that we were designed for a higher purpose. Just like computers were designed for a purpose. What's the purpose of a computer besides to make you angry and send a lot of money down the drain? What's the purpose of a computer? To compute. Brilliant. You are brilliant. To serve humans. To serve the person who owns the computer. Yes, call up Dell, Microsoft. This is the original purpose, what you're supposed to design this thing for. Right, to serve you. I know you're all too young to remember. I remember not having a computer and writing everything on paper. Well, I'm not too far away from that. But could you imagine doing a doctoral dissertation purely on paper? Or typing it with a typewriter. I still have that thing. I still call the enter key on the computer the return key. And right now, if you're sitting here going, I have no idea what he's talking about, you're young. Anyways, where was I? See, my wife's not here to keep me on target. Oh, I returned to the earlier question of what we were designed for. I didn't forget that question. If the purpose was only to serve ourselves, see, now we're talking about human sexuality. Says we were biologically designed to do for a purpose, but that purpose is only to serve ourselves. If that is true, then sex would only serve our own desires. Who wants that in a sexual relationship? Even, as we would say, only in marriage, who would want that? That sex is only about the other person's desire. You know, I don't want that in a relationship. Sure, let's be honest. It seems like that's what guys are. Guys are only caring about their own desires. I realize that. That's the idea, and many times it can be true. But do you remember the hookup generation? The hookup generation was young people would make a date, get together just to be intimate with no attachment. It was just a physical arrangement. They found it failed because even the guys in that situation got drawn in emotionally. They were looking for something more than just the physical. That's the problem with sexual promiscuity. You think it's just a function, but it's not, because you weren't designed to just be a human functioning sexual thing. So what if we were designed to serve others? For the Christian, what is the stated purpose of marriage? Is it to produce children? That's a question. Is the purpose of marriage to produce children? Yes, one of them. You're right, you looked ahead. Yes, it is to produce children. Ephesians 5:25 and 26, however, speaks of more than that. More than that. Now, it gives a metaphor, and we understand that when you use metaphors, you have to be careful not to apply a metaphor concretely absolute, but to gain the general idea. Lee, do you have that? 2 verses, Ephesians 5:25 and 26. Could you read them for us? Okay, it's a run. Andrew's going to beat you with the old paper. Yay, paper! Ephesians 5:25 and... Who's there?
Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that he might present the church to himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that she might be holy and without blemish.
So do you see? Giving. It's a sense of giving. The sexual relation aspect is about serving the other, giving to the other person. Christ gives his love to us, and the husband and wife give themselves to each other. So I said we have to be careful about not trying to expand the metaphor too far, otherwise you will be accusing Christ of improper sexual things, and that has been done, but that's not what that verse means. It's to teach giving. So what or how should we view human sexuality? Not as an end in itself, but a means to giving to another and to God. Okay, I got the part where you said to give to another, but you said to God. You're talking about human sexuality, giving to God? Oh, I think you're getting blasphemous. Wait. When we do sex God's way, he is pleased. And it got really quiet. What? Marital sex pleases God? This was the part where every guy in the church should have showed up and be clapping right now. Hey, honey, we need to go to this Sunday school. It's really good stuff there. But yes, I'm purporting married sex done God's way pleases God. because it is a reflection of Christ giving of himself to two people, husband and wife, giving to each other. So what would that say about doing sex not God's way? Let's turn to the next topic. The subtopic is in heterosexual human sexuality. If my ruling out sex outside of marriage is successful, then what are we to think of adultery? Does it serve ourselves or others? That's the question. I think you can figure out that I'm saying it serves ourselves. Now, I thought, I'm into philosophy, so every time I think something, I think of the objections and I try to run through them. I could see someone saying, wait a minute, what if in a marriage the other person is a cold fish, doesn't give love, and I have to go outside my marriage to find love because they aren't serving me?
Love and sex are not the same thing.
Should they be?
They can be, but they are not.
Right. I think we...
There is a marriage when you love one another, but it doesn't mean that when you have sex, you love the person.
Actually, I was talking to a guy back in my Air Force days, and he was having relations outside of marriage, and his defense was, it's okay because I don't love them. I only love my wife, so they mean nothing. Wow. I thought, if I tried that one on my wife, you would have a different teacher here today. But your point is taken, but ideally it was to be the same thing. And I understand there's different perspectives, even in the church. In the sense, I've had women tell me, my husband, not an affair, but my husband only thinks I'm a piece of meat to him. He only wants my body. I would contend to you, I don't know that situation personally, but I would contend to you probably as a woman, you don't understand the way men think. A man is physical. That's how he expresses his love. And a man also expresses his love, used to be, by providing you with a house and car, by providing. Oh, I don't want that, I want him. But to him, that is him. And fairness, guys, do we understand our wives? I think far less. 39 years I've been married, and I still don't understand her. So, and I think that's because women are very detailed oriented. Guys are like singular track. My one friend said to get her husband to take the trash out, she literally has to get between him and his books. Take the trash out. Because he's like hyper-focused. That's us guys. Isn't it true that women, when you tell us a problem you have, what are we thinking? How to do what? Fix it, because that's a guy. Where you want us to listen. So I'm saying there's a difference between men and women, right? And this goes to the sexual relationship, even when sex is love. So, there's an understanding there. Okay, so what I'm saying is even if, ignoring what you said, even if the person said they were having an affair because they couldn't find love in their own marriage, which if you watch the old Perry Mason shows, the black and whites one, every woman there was depicted as either being alcoholic or wanting love. That's all they depicted women as. It was like, but anyways, even if you say you're having an affair to find love, what I'm saying is, it isn't the institution of marriage that's the problem, it's the persons in the marriage. And I believe it takes two. Probably, not absolute, probably, the person who is not giving the love has the wrong understanding of what it is to be in that marriage. He just doesn't get it. I'm not saying the one who cheated is okay. What were you going to say, Lee?
I got an old guy's perspective for you might think about. If our purpose in life is to have a relationship with God, fellowship with God is the reason we were created, and that God wants to know us intimately,
Right?
okay? Marriage is a reflection of that relationship on earth. It is the closest relationship we will ever have to the relationship that we were intended to have with God. So much so that linguistically you can see it in the text. The word, he went in and knew his wife, the word gnosko, is the same word that's used as when we talk about our relationship with God. It's the same relationship in sex and in the marriage bond that God wants to have with us. So those things are parallel with one another. Okay? So
Right.
sexuality is a reflection of the intimacy and the knowledge of another person in totality, much like God wants to have with us.
I steadfastly agree. And if at home you didn't hear that, Lee was basically saying the idea that in the Bible, husband and wife love is a reflection. That marriage is a reflection of Christ's love for us. But it's not just like a real general. It speaks of the depth of that relationship, the value of that relationship. But it's something we can point to and say, this is to teach us what it's like to have a close, intimate relationship with God. Not physical per se, like the human sexuality in a marriage, but even deeper level. Is that possible? I haven't figured that out, how to do that yet. But just let me end this part with, when we look at that verse, let me get myself, I gave the guys something to cheer about. Now I'm going to get myself in hot water. Fellas, where does the bulk of the responsibility for that in the marriage lie? According to Ephesians 5, where does it lie? On the fellas. We have the responsibility, the command to love our wives like Christ loves the church. Like Christ loves the church. That's like saying that I am to be a pilot like Chuck Yeager. Are you kidding? Are you kidding me? You know, to love our wives like Christ loves the church, that is a tremendous weight of responsibility and burden. Burden's not the right word. I'm just impetus, right? So, I'm not trying to brag, but I remember at times I was mad at my wife, and I had a conversation with God. I didn't hear God audibly. I don't have those experiences, but it was like, she did wrong. And what are you supposed to do? Nothing. She did wrong. She's wrong. I'm tired of always being the one who's a victim here in this fights we have. You know, I'm not doing nothing until she says she's sorry. Is that the way you want me to treat you? This is what I'm imagining God would say. Well, no. Then, okay, but I'm not going to be really nice. I'm going to say I'm sorry, but I'm not going to be all lovey-dovey because until she, and tell you, the minute I said I'm sorry, all the walls came down. And I'm like, I'm really sorry you were wrong. No, I didn't say that. But, I'm sorry we fought. I love you. It was just amazing how that changed, and that impetus is upon the man, I believe. So, human sexuality, it's far deeper than just a physical act. And thus, we should talk about it. We should admonish our young people to see the rationality and the value in doing it God's way. Not because we say so because we're the church, because that's what you were designed for. You were designed to have a close, intimate relationship in marriage. You were designed to have fun in marriage. And maybe if you're young, you're thinking, well, that's a given. No. I'll tell you, as older married people, sometimes we forget the fun. My grandson is teaching me what it is like to have optimism again, to just be happy for no apparent reason whatsoever, thinking, this is why God gives us grandchildren, to call us back before we got cynical and jaded. Before we forgot what it was like to adore our wives, to just be like after them all the time, just to hug them, to tell them they're pretty, all those things. And I'm speaking from a guy's perspective. I'm sure you ladies could speak of your side, But as we close today, there is another aspect to this human sexuality, not just generally, not just heterosexual, but homosexual sexuality. How do we think about this? How do we consider it? Are we allowed to discuss it? So I've actually planned to get partway through that section, but I didn't, and leave part of it for next week, because next week we're going to go over human rights. The rights of us as humans generally, the rights of the mother, the unborn, the rights of those who are not heterosexual, those who are homosexual. We're going to talk about that, and this will be a good place to put that consideration. So, I got 1 minute left. Was there any comments, questions, throwing apples at me that you wanted? Father, I was going to say thank you for human sexuality. Okay, typical man, I maybe be said, but Lord, I think we forget sometimes who it is that invented it, who created it, who designed it, and who, in your brilliance, added the soul part to it, that it is not just physical sex, but it should be love, and it involves all of us. And one of the purposes is to reflect what you desire of us. You crave for us to be in that relationship with you. Thank you, Jesus. Amen.